Okay, thank you very much for the very kind introduction. First of all, can you hear me at the back? Yeah, okay. So I'm Edward Yu, and this paper is co-authored by Chung, a colleague in the same University of Auckland as me, and then also Paavo. Very nice that we can come together to have this paper presented. And this paper has just been published in the Urban Studies. So now the full paper can be downloaded open access, and with the link provided in this PowerPoint. And the title of the topic is about the heterogeneous impact of widespread upzoning, lessons from Auckland, New Zealand. I think you really find the two very interesting keywords here, because upzoning have been studied quite a lot. But very often, the upzoning effect would be found to be positive, say, on property prices. But then in this study, first of all, it is not a localized spot upzoning, but a widespread, the whole city, broad upzoning. So it will have a very different, at least theoretically, it should have a very different impact on the market, on the property market. And then we also would like to put forward this argument that instead of the only positive sign of upzoning, so we tried to identify the positive versus negative externalities, because probably you would agree that upzoning on the one hand can provide more property for area, which sometimes would be argued to help reduce housing price and rent, but then at the same time that it can increase density, which can be a negative externality. So that is why the title is called heterogeneous impact. Sorry. Yeah. So let me show you some background first. Here the map shows the Auckland city, and with the city center here, and what we call the AUP, the Auckland Unitary Plan, which has been upzoned in 2016. And it covers the whole Auckland region, which is about 4,900 square kilometers, which we think should be one of the biggest upzoning programs so far in the world. And the target is to build more than 400,000 dwellings in the next 3 decades. And also the target is to create 18% growth in the city main area. So that is the reason why it will provide some very different, interesting experiments to identify about a broad upzoning program's impact on housing market, especially when suddenly so large-scale potential housing supply in the whole Auckland regions will be enabled. So we focus on the 4 main types of zoning for residential properties in this AUP. And the reason why we choose New Zealand, because it is one of the biggest upzoning, broad upzoning program, and also it starts from 2016, and it allows its 4 main types of zoning for residential area. So single house was originally the most common residential zones, but now it upzoned to either MHS, mixed housing suburban, which the diagram shows that it is a medium densification. Or it can be upzoned to MHU, that's mixed housing urban, which will have even a larger, higher density than MHS. And then the highest density one would be the terrace housing and apartment building. So we use THAB to stand for it. So in the coming analysis, you will find the results to be reported in SH, MXS, MXU, and THAB. So basically, you can have a simple idea that SH is the lowest density, and then MXS, MXU, and THAB. So in this study, besides identifying about the upzoning effect on a housing market, we also match the census statistic and to identify about the relationship between neighborhood income level and their upzoning result. And you will find a very interesting result, which is our third hypothesis here. So let me go through, but because of the time limitation, I will skip hypothesis 2, and I will only focus on hypothesis 1 and 3. And if you are interested in hypothesis 2, then you can download the paper and try to take a look. But then the hypothesis 1 is very straightforward one. We ask whether upzoning will lead to price increase. And the theory has been mentioned in many previous papers that it is real options theory. Right? You provide potentially increasing portfolio area. So it provides an option, a real option for the owners to exercise. And that's the theory to support the hypothesis 1, explaining why upzoning will lead to land value appreciation. And then for hypothesis 3, it is a study about political economy, whether the government will be under such a political pressure that high income neighborhood will be less likely to be upzoned. And that is a very interesting finding, because upzoning effect, as hypothesis 2, is to identify the upzoning impact on different income neighborhoods. While politically, and we found that in the high income neighborhood will be less likely to be upzoned. And most of the SH, the single house residential zone, will be retained in high income neighborhood. So I'm not going into details of the literature, we reviewed it, but we would like to highlight the 4 major contributions that our paper made. The first one, as I mentioned, that most of the previous studies on upzoning effect were sports upzoning, very small scale, say for example, just at a neighborhood with new transportation provision. But then in this case, it's a whole city broad upzoning effect. And as Paavo's previous paper in 2019 mentioned that, right, such a broad and widespread upzoning would have different price and supply effect. Yeah. And then another, I really would like to emphasize today about this contribution is to use the residual development potential, because upzoning effect very often is considered as an urban planning issue. And so very often, just like we quote here, another paper produced by our colleagues in the University of Auckland, they consider whether those sites have been upzoned or not without considering the residual development intensity. So we try to combine urban planning knowledge together with building surveying knowledge, because it's not just about how zoning increase your development potential, but are there any remaining development potential that you haven't used even before? Okay, so we really think this is a very important issue. Later on in the result, you will find that the residual development potential can explain quite a lot of the effect, while upzoning may be shown to have negative externality. Okay, and then it directly related to the food literature considering positive externality, but indeed, upzoning can have both benefit and cost. Just as our paper going to identify that, right, a density or high density neighborhood, especially for high income households, may be considered as a negative externality. And that's why, on the one hand, there are two camps of argument, right? On the one hand, people can argue that upzoning can increase housing production and associated with a decrease in rents. But another camp would argue that housing redevelopment in low-income neighborhoods would result in gentrification. So these are the heterogeneous impact of upzoning on neighborhood. So let's go directly into our study. So first of all,
is there in this upzoning strategy, is there a special strategy to upzone the city, or is indiscriminate upzoning the same level for the whole city?
No, of course, right, it requires urban planning consultation, and then the urban planner would try to minimize the conflict, and that's why there must be a strategy. Mm-hmm. And in detail, you can refer to the link from our council, the Auckland Council, after several years consultation, and they finally come out with some kind of compatibility, right? Trying to say conserve single house area in Old Town, and then maybe try to put higher rise or higher density development in the edge. Yeah. So first of all, when we are talking about residual development intensity, the new concept we introduced in this study, but it's not directly available because you have to identify each lot, parcel by parcel, how much development potential haven't been used. So it takes a long time, and fortunately, we have a data provider, Willa, in New Zealand. They can help to identify each parcels of land on their existing floor area used and the land area for us to carry out the analysis.
Sorry, may I just go back to the thing with the effects of on land values? Is it assumed that the zoning is binding everywhere? That the maximum density that is allowed by zoning plan is binding both in central areas and at the outskirts? Because there are theoretical implications, for instance, by Brickner, that the effects on land values might be different actually if zoning is less binding in suburbs, if you are not using all the development potential there.
So I would say in the context of Auckland, in the city center, there have been a large number of single houses built decades ago, and they had not been used up 100% of the development potential even before the upzoning. And that's why subdivisions has been very commonly adopted in the city center. So I think in the context of Auckland, the opposite would be the truth. In the city center, there are quite a large number of existing lots which have not been used up 100%. Yeah. And then the reason why we make use of appraisal instead of transaction price is because it can increase the number of observations to a large number that we can analyze about the impact of upzoning. And fortunately, I think it also has the same practice in the UK, right? The government will carry out appraisal of 100% of housing in Auckland region every 5 years. And that's why we can make use of the repeated appraisal values approach. Try to see how much does it change between 2 appraisal periods of each houses to identify the upzoning impact after controlling all other factors. Maybe I will show you the equation later on. But let's show you some examples that Williams data can provide. And here I show 3 addresses. And you will find that the database can tell the existing floor area, land area, and also by means of the upzoned permission to identify the maximum permissible development intensity, 4 by 4. Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit how the appraisal is being done? If there is not like the upzoning itself, if it's not like a part of the procedure, how to appraise real estate?
Yeah, good point. Good point. So of course they would not tell in details, but as I have been involved in both in the Hong Kong government's valuation departments and also have some discussion and interview with the councillors in the Auckland region. What I understand is, indeed, they are referring to transactions comparables nearby and take into account the changes, including the neighborhood change and the structure changes, so as to make adjustment. So valuers employed by the council would carry out this appraisal, first of all, referring to the recent housing transaction price nearby as comparable first, and then make adjustment to those quality changes. And that's why they can even provide land value appraisal as well as improvement value appraisal that we are going to use in the model. Yeah. It looks a little bit complicated, right? First of all, it is a repeated appraised property value method, just like repeat sales method. But now the dependent variable is the lateral log of the ratio of the appraised property value in the 2 period, before and after the upzoning. And then, as I mentioned, right, one of the key variables we are going to analyze is the RFAR. That's the residual floor area ratio. And then trying to control about the quality of the structure. So we also include the improvement value ratio here. That means, say for example, if the landlord had put in money to upgrade or renovate, rehabilitate the structure, and these values change, have been controlled. And then we also control about the income level of the neighborhood change, the IA, and the distance to city center. So as you mentioned, right, maybe the suburb and the city center may have difference, and here we put in a distance from the city center as a control variable. And then RFAR is defined by the maximum permissible development floor area minus the existing built area divided by the land area. So let's go into the result now. So here is the baseline model and shown in 4 different residential zones. The SH only for model 3A, and then MHS only, MHQ only, and PHAB only. And you will find that the colored figure, no matter which zones they are, the residual floor area effect are all positive and increasing. So the baseline model tells us that greater level of upzoning increased property value more, from 2% to 13%. So it agrees with previous study. Yeah. But then if we take into account the residual floor area effect from the zoning effect, and here maybe I explain a little bit. So model 2A and 2B are all from single house zone changed to other higher density zone. Model 2A does not include the residual floor area effect, while 2B increase. Similarly, 2C and 2D is from LHS to other zone with or without the control of residual floor area. And you will find a very interesting result. Say, for example, for a single house, increasing density from single house to, say, for example, TKB, right? The higher the density you allow to upzone, then the higher the premium in land value increase. But then, if you take into account the residual floor area, and it explains a lot, and which reduce the zoning effect, and sometimes it even results in a significant negative effect, implying that some of the effect of increasing property values are because of the residual, while the zoning effect can be negative. That is the heterogeneous impact that we found. And then for downzoning, say for example from GHAB, downzones to single house or LHS, they will be resulting in negative figures. So that's hypothesis 1 effect. And then let's go into the hypothesis 3 result, which is a neighborhood level and making use of Toby to study about the likelihood of upzoning. So maybe we go into this diagram, the bar chart first. It tells a very interesting story. So the blue bar refers to the likelihood or the percentage that is upzoned, while the gray bar refers to downzoned percentage. And it shows vividly that the higher income neighborhood will get less likelihood to be upzoned, but higher likelihood to be downzoned. So it confirmed, right, the political economy argument that indeed the government, after the consultation, they tried to conserve single house, low density neighborhood in higher income neighborhood, while yes, sir.
Hi, thank you, Edward. Just a quick question about the upzoning in Auckland. So currently, who decide which parcels to have the upzoning? Or the upzoning is like a standard applied to all the parcels, like in Auckland? Or it's like particular regions, or do they have like selection criteria?
So there's an urban planning department, right, and the council, and they have to undergo a series of consultation with households and residents, and then they produce their consultation papers, and finally, it is not a one-off. So it depends on the objective of the government is to increase about 400,000 dwellings in the coming 3 decades, right? So that's the target. But then where to put those upzones was first of all proposed by the panel, and then carry out consultation. Some neighborhoods will welcome, while some neighborhoods do not. And then after consultation, they will make a final proposals, and that have been undertaken in 2016. And then after these 6 years of practices, and now indeed it has been implemented in the whole country and become a new government policy for the whole country.
Isn't it more related to home ownership rather than the incomes? Because think about if you are, no matter you are a rich guy or poor guy, if you're already a homeowner in a certain location, I will be against of any upzoning because any extra supply will affect my housing value. But if I'm a renter, I just want to pay less of the rent, right? So no matter I'm a poor renter or a rich renter, so I would welcome like the upzoning. So I'm thinking, yeah, it's rather instead of thinking about the income to differentiate the impact, I think could be home ownership.
Good point. Yeah, but of course, renters may also want to have a lower density. I don't know. That's a very good question, right? But at least you have made a very interesting point that besides studying about the income level of a neighborhood, maybe we can also identify about the home ownership level.
And also, who made the decision? I understand you can do a lot of round of consultation with the residents. So in the end, like there's a panel to decide which land to upzone, or it's parcel level decision, or it's like a region level decision. Or
the council is the region level, right? Auckland Council is now governed by a council which is democratically elected. So I think that is the kind of mechanism. The urban planning department make proposal and carry out consultation and bring it back and finalize, and finally the decision maker are the elected members of the council. So if people do not like their decision, then next round they will not be elected. Yeah.
Just a linked question. To what extent is income level related to conservation and heritage status of neighbourhoods? I'm imagining one part of that decision making about which areas to upzone to what degree would have intersected with things like conservation area status, which, which would mean that either can't happen or is very limited.
Exactly. Yeah. I think very similar to the policy in the UK, right? There are heritage area. Indeed, in New Zealand, the law governing heritage and conservation is very rigid and make use of this isochrone area, which will have limitation in development.
And I'm imagining that those areas are probably likely to be more wealthy areas. So it's a similar point to Ren, I think, that low-income neighbourhoods might be a factor of other things like home ownership levels, but also their conservation.
Yeah, agree. Yeah. So that may open up a follow-up study. Probably we should also exclude those areas, maybe conservative or heritage protected area. But frankly speaking, I don't think we got a large number of conservation area in Auckland. It's not as old town as Brandon here. Yeah. So maybe I skip the result, right? It simply tells that no matter it's in single house or MHS or MHU or all four zones, the income level will have a negative effect on the likelihood of upzoning. So it just reports about this chart. So maybe I can come up to the result first of all. The hypothesis one is supported. Higher level of upzoning increase property value more. But our emphasis is that it's not just about the zoning effect, but it is the residual floor area effect. Because zoning effect can have both positive side or negative side, depending whether the neighborhood embraces it or not.
Yeah, is it property values, is it land values or structure values? Like
land value.
And it could be something said about, let's say, value of 1 unit of housing, let's say value per house.
So take single house will be easier to explain, right? So there's the whole lot with just one house, and then we measure the change of the appraised value of the whole lot.
Because I do understand that on average, if density increases, land might become more valuable. But I'm just like wondering what's the final, let's say, value of a unit of housing, because there are other studies that are suggesting that actually upzoning is decreasing the value of residential unit because they are just provided at higher densities and you increase supply. So I'm just like wondering what would be result if you would look at a value per unit of housing.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. I think Paavo's previous paper mentioned that when it is a broad upzoning, then the supply effect can be very strong. So as you mentioned, right, sometimes they even could not maximize the upzoning permissible development. Yeah, but in this case, we are measuring about the potential option value, so we did not include the measurement on supply side. But basically, in the past 2 decades, Auckland was one of the most unaffordable cities in the world, and so it is quite commonly recognized that in Auckland the housing supply is insufficient. Yeah. Okay, so maybe I do not have to read them out. The PowerPoint will be available if you would like to have a look. And then the hypothesis 3, right, is another very interesting result that higher income neighborhoods are found to have less likelihood to be upzoned. So it is consistent with other studies on the political pressures of upzoning. Yeah, here the diagram shows an example, right? The original neighborhood, and then after upzone, it becomes townhouses. Yeah, from single house, now it either subdivided or we developed into a series of townhouses. So it is a broad upzoning, and this is the reason why this study will have the international relevancy. And frankly speaking, after this study, there have been a strong debate in Canada about, probably you have heard about the final decision of the Parliament in Canada. They decided to upzone another block upzone in Toronto now. And then before that, indeed, the news reporters make a phone call to our team to ask about this study, right? And another study, right? So these studies is now quite relevant to other countries' upzoning decisions. And then I probably would like to make a conclusion here. As I mentioned, first of all, it is relatively rare to have a citywide upzoning. So this is probably one of the first cohort. And the novelty is that it's not just about measuring the zoning change, but the residual floor area allows it. And to increase the number of samples, we make use of the repeated appraisal property valuation method. And then I will repeat the result, and the implication of this study is that because now we understand that there are heterogeneous impacts, then is upzoning a solution to housing affordability have to be re-examined? Because upzoning on the one hand may increase housing supply, but on the other hand, it can also reduce housing prices. It depends on the neighborhood attitude, I think. And then bearing in mind that upzoning may not be positive, but it can also impose negative externalities. Right? Sometimes high density neighborhoods that homeowners may not appreciate. So that is a reflection to many of your questions. And who or how should we design which neighborhoods should be upzoned or downzoned, right? Should it be the planning professional, or should it be politician, or the public at large? That's my final slide. We acknowledge about we have for the data, and also we have very good support from their research on background, context, as well as the map making, and also we thank all of you, right, attending today, and all your comments and suggestions will be welcome. Thank you very much.